Welcome to the Founder Leader podcast, where we unpack what scaling a company does to people, relationships, and leadership. I'm Johanna, I'm your host and program manager for the leadership development program with the same name, Founder to Leader. And in each episode, I'm joined by 3 guests with different perspectives to help me unpack a real leadership dilemma. So let's get started. In this episode, we're unpacking what happens when a commercial and a scientific co-founder disagree on how much they can promise externally during a competitive scaling phase. And I'm very happy to introduce you to my guests for today. I have founder Marvin Holten, researcher Signe Vikkelsø, and leadership coach Jung with me here in the studio. And Marvin, you are a co-founder and a CTO at DIASENSE, and you come from a research background in quantum technology. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And Signe, you are a professor of science, technology, and organization at Copenhagen Business School. So very happy to have you here as well.
My pleasure.
And Mia, you are the head of leadership development and a leadership coach for Founder to Leader at Copenhagen Business School. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So our dilemma for today comes from Lucas, and a quick disclaimer that Lucas isn't his real name. And he writes, "My co-founder leads commercials and I lead research. A few well-funded competitors are moving fast on the same kind of tech, and the pressure to commit publicly to timelines and what the product can do feels enormous. And my co-founder says that we have to promise a little more than what we can currently deliver to investors and customers. I get the logic because we are running out of cash, but every time I hear what we're saying externally, I panic because I don't know if we can deliver what we're selling, and I'm even less sure if we can do it on time. This is my first startup, so my question is if this is just what scaling looks like, or if I'm right to push back so that we move slower, but that we get it right." So Marvin, you are a founder leading research. So is this a dilemma that you can see yourself in?
Yes, most definitely. I think so. In my company, we are building a microscope that is a very complex development, and I basically have this exact discussion with my co-founder and CEO every week. I think, and my very first feedback to Lucas when I read this would be, it's not actually just okay to push back, but it's absolute responsibility as the technical co-founder to do so. I think that's an absolute must. He has to push back. And the reason I say this is that I believe there's actually a very positive process. So in our case, my co-founder and CEO, he's always pushing to promise more and more and more, and then I'm pushing back from the research side, and in the end we meet somewhere in the middle. So to give an example, we are building this microscope, and for the first prototype, I said it's not possible to do it before December. My co-founder said we have to get it done in May for our customers, and in the end we did it in September. So I think this process of constantly pushing the border and redefining where it is also helps you to actually achieve things that wouldn't be possible without this conflict.
And I see Signe writing, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this dilemma as well from your research angle.
I think this is a really nice example of that in every organizational endeavor, and especially in startups, there's this nice tension between hope and reality, and that you need to find out how those two positively influence each other. So, of course, the hope should be realistic, but realism should also be extended with hope. So you don't get caught up in what is currently possible, and what are you used to doing. On the other hand, you should also be aware of not overcommitting or being unrealistic. And I think you nicely. It's I like your expression, Marvin, that this is actually a weekly tension. So you imagine this is once you sort of find this sweet spot between hope and reality. But actually, I think it's something you do every day, more or less, but it's actually possible.
I think my mind goes more towards the concept of roles and thinking from the role, because I think very often what happens in these co-founder tensions are that it becomes personal and then it turns into conflict. So this kind of looking at this, understanding this as role tension, that is something that is embedded in the roles of sales and the commercial side and the product and the development, that it's not just about the people, the people with the product and the development and the tech not wanting to push forward. And it's also not about the commercial and the salespeople just being irresponsible, but it's something that is also built into the task of the role, of the specific role. So you can also depersonalize it a little bit. So like, well, it's actually part of my role in sales to push forward and to keep pushing and deliver what the customers want, so we can move ahead. And for the product people, to say, well, it's my responsibility that we have a good product that is good enough so we don't get complaints, so we actually have a sustainable business in the end. And then understanding, that is the task of the role, to protect those things. And then how do we then collaborate with those two objectives from each role, and not making it about someone being, irritating or not wanting to collaborate or not wanting to move forward, but to also understand, well, some of it is embedded in the role.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that to think about this in roles, and that has also helped me and my co-founder a lot, because in the beginning this conflict felt very personal and very emotional, and then at some point we just brought it on the table that yes, my role as a scientific researcher is to always push back, and his role is to always find where are the boundaries of what we can promise. And this helped us a lot to just bring it on the table, and then also for me to try to put myself in his position, because that is of course actually the same difficulty. So he's just coming from the other side, that he has the constant pressure from investors, from customers to deliver more, and the tech is maybe not where he would like it to be. So I think seeing it from both sides and seeing it as a pure role related problem then takes this personal problem a little bit out of it.
Becomes different conversation.
I come to think also that this is also a dilemma that raises the topic or the issue of conflict. How do you navigate or deal with conflict in startups as a particular a moment, but also as it scale, those conflicts will just grow because in the startup you have this very in a sense simple conflict between something can we do this and can we sell this, and as you grow and scale, there will also be other types of dilemmas or other concerns also as to can we do this while also doing that. So sort of mediating between, you only have a certain amount of resources, also manpower. So you cannot do everything, even if it was scientifically possible. You cannot organizationally, make ends meet. So those things will only become even more salient as you grow. And that's why it's very important to think also about conflict resolution mechanisms in organization. How do you actually deal with such natural conflicts? And I come to think, I teach also conflict management, and there is a classic distinction between task conflicts, process conflicts, and relational conflicts. And task conflicts are usually positive because it's about equally important knowledge and perspectives as to do the task well. And I guess that's also, we could do it this, but this is also important to think in that. And that's usually positive if you're able to sort of actually move forward and make the task, to accomplish the task better, because you allow this search for different aspects of the task. But what is usually very detrimental if it develops into a relational conflict. So you begin to think, well, Marvin, he has a lot of nice points, but he's also an annoying person. So now I'm tired of listening to him. So this where you sort of begin to forget the task focus and begin to bigger on each other as persons. And I think that for me is something to look out for. Also personally, that you keep your eyes on the ball. How do I play it well? Or make sure we play it well.
Yeah. And what is the difference there also between, because you said process conflicts
as
well. So what is the difference there between task conflict and process conflict?
process conflict is theoretically you define it as when you are disagreeing about how to do things, or who should do it, like more administrative conflicts about is it Marvin or is it Mia that is going to do? Then you have like a conflict about not having organized it clearly who's doing what, and that can also really tap a startup for or any organization for energy. That I thought you did it. I thought you did. So you have this, that saps energy, and that should also usually be clarified who's doing what.
100%.
And I guess that's also very often a resource matter, right? Like not having enough resources to do everything you want to do.
Yes.
And then, it becomes tension because it's actually really
Yes.
important. And that can also, and in a startup, it's, you don't have a lot of resources. You don't have the time to do everything you want to do. Like, I don't think in any organization, but in particularly startups are resource stretched.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think that is also why there's so much value actually can be in this conflict that Lucas is describing here, because then you should also actually understand why is it that he can't promise these kind of things that his co-founder is asking for, and that's something that we have realized a lot in my team, that when I say we can't promise this, I can only deliver the microscope by December, then I write all the things down that delay this, and then we actually tap into these resources. What resources are we missing? And then actually I realized that my other co-founder, the CEO, he actually has a lot of ideas and also things he can change about how we operate to then make it possible. And I think that's why you can actually gain a lot from these kind of conflicts if you address them right.
But it sounded before that currently you and your co-founder are very much in a role and task conversation then. Has that always been the case, or is that something that you have developed over the years when you work together?
I think it has always been the case from the very start that we had these roles, because that was very natural since I have the scientific background and he has the more business startup background. What has changed is I think that we are now understand this much better as in this picture that Mia has brought up from our roles. So it has become a much more, now it feels actually very natural and positive, while in the beginning sometimes it was more difficult, and I had similar feelings in the beginning that Lucas is describing now, that I was panicking. Okay, I can't deliver what my co-founder is asking for, and I think in this way it has changed a lot. But I think it has been there from very early on as a very natural conflict that we always have.
Got it. But then it sounds a bit like in the beginning it was more like focus on the relation and a bit more like the personal aspect that Signe was talking about. But then over the years you've been able to have the conversation from like a role and task point of view instead.
Exactly, and focusing much more on the data. Where in the beginning I was just, when he was asking me, can we get it done by May? I was just saying no and panicking that's impossible, and focusing just on this very hard pushback. And now we are focusing much more on why can't it be possible by May, and what resources can we tap into to make it possible. So taking it away from this immediate blockade from my side into a more positive and constructive process to figure out where are the limits and how can we change them.
I think it also makes me think about the concept of personal risk, that building a startup is very, very personal. So it's also natural that it feels like panic when you cannot deliver, because it's your project. There's like no other external organization. You can just say like, well, I'm just doing my job. I'm just employed here. It's not it is your thing when you are a founder. So it is deeply personal. So it's very natural that it feels extremely emotional, ups and downs, the wins and the lows. And ultimately, it's also about that personal risk that you take on. And I'm also thinking about how that can feel quite differently from a researcher and a non-researcher. And now sitting here with two researchers, I'm sure you know from your own academic world how much you need to be, you really need to know what you're saying when you're putting something out, and how many rounds of feedback and the detail of feedback that goes into to research and paper writing and so forth. And it's a different logic than the logic of building a startup that is just a lot about like good enough. How can we do good enough with what the very limited resources we have? And thinking about risk as personal risk as two different ways when you come from the research world and then transitioning into this startup is really different from
Mm.
the classical fake it till you make it hustle narrative that is so dominant in the startup world, and how heavy it can feel on the shoulders of founders to stand there with the risk. And if we don't succeed, it's also me who is not succeeding, who have not done it well enough, depending on what sort of reference frame that we come in with.
Mhm. I think you're pointing at something, Mia, that is very important, which is this distinction between perfect and good enough, which I think scientists and salespersons often differ about, or have different opinions on when is the work done, when can we sell this. And I don't know if you have some points on this, Marvin, about, or you could give some examples on, because I guess it's not either you do or either you don't, but about exactly what kind of the ambitions can you actually honor, and what other kinds or aspects do you have to scale, be a little more realistic about. So it's also about fine-tuning the narrative about what you're doing, rather than say, oh, we're doing something fantastic, or we're not doing something, or we're doing something catastrophic. No, we're doing a specific thing where we can now better specify at the point we are at.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point, and I think there's that you also brought up with this scientific background, because especially in science, actually, when you're making bold claims in a research paper, then typically the reviewers actually punish you. In a deep tech startup, I think to some degree there has to be room for bold claims, and I think you also have to realize that maybe some of the responsibility is not only as you on a founder, but also and on the investors. They also expect you as a deep tech startup to be bold and to have bold claims, and so I think that's also something to realize, that to some degree it's also fine to move the border maybe a little bit from the pure science viewpoint, where everything has to be 100% solid, to yes, we are bold, and we don't know for everything if we can actually succeed, and that is fine. And investors know that this is the case, and customers when they're working with a deep tech startup.
I'm thinking it's also about distinguishing a little bit between vision, the broad kind of reach for the star vision, and then the concrete targets, and then the very specific validated capabilities of what you're selling.
Yeah.
So that is not either or. It's about really making that to define those things and make sure they actually support each other, rather than have this big gap between what the vision is and then what the validated capabilities actually are.
Yeah, and I think also back to that, and to your point, Marvin, as well, with the investors putting a lot of pressure on startups. There is also this, what I'm reading in this dilemma is also this exposure to that pressure, where the commercial lead, the co-founder, the CEO, will most likely also be more exposed to that external pressure that comes from investors to deliver, or customers to deliver fast, and when can we see results, and why is it taking so long? Whereas someone sitting more with the product is a way, sometimes or very often, one step removed from that pressure, and it comes more indirectly. So there's also this dynamic that comes through. How does it also become the commercial co-founder become the medium from that for that external pressure, and something playing out in that dynamic that sometimes maybe can feel for that commercial founder as very heavy on their shoulders, because they have to carry that external pressure, and can also then color how they perceive the shielding of the co-founder sitting with the product. Like, well, you have no idea what's going on outside in the market. Can't you see how little money we have left? If we don't deliver now, we don't have a business. And that can also, again, start derailing the conversation and make it more personal and not task-based or process-based and constructive.
It's like a rubber band that you have to stretch it maximally, but not break it. So there's something about finding that what can we actually, how big can that gap be before things don't hang well together anymore or are broken.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I said in the beginning. I think that's exactly why I say it is so important to have this discussion, and he should definitely talk to his commercial co-founder, because what is another very big risk, and there he's completely right to panic. You don't want to promise something that you know is impossible. That will definitely lead to more problems for the startup, or might even make it end. So I think that's also something to be aware of. That it is absolutely important to have this conversation with his co-founder.
But you also cannot run out of cash. So there needs to be a both and to be able to, ideally, that both parties can take the responsibility for both things, even though the roles and the tasks are different, that we both take responsibility for not running out of cash and also for not sending out a product that is not ready and that we cannot stand behind.
I'm curious, Marvin, some more from an organizational point of view, if we kind of go a bit broader. When you or your co-founder disagree or discuss whatever word you want to use on like the timeline, the performance and the vision, etc., how do you think about like communicating or filtering that to the rest of the team so that you have like a united front?
I mean, I think what we use as a tool most generally is our pitch deck, which is quite basic, but it works very well. That whatever is in the pitch deck, that is what we show to the outside world and to our team, and that is something that we basically have to agree on. And if we disagree on something, I think that also often shows that actually we don't have enough data on this promise yet. Why can't we make this promise? So, I think that's a very hard boundary that we draw. Whatever we promise, we both have to agree on that this is possible to do.
So to answer Lucas' questions, is this what scaling look like? Yes. Am I right to push back so we move slower but get it right? Also yes. So what I'm hearing from my guests here in the studio is, first of all, that it is your role as a scientific co-founder to push back. So it is your role to kind of care deeply about the quality and the safety and the results of what it is that you're building. But it's also your commercial co-founder's role to push for speed and push to move things forward as well. And Signe gave us a good framework or mental model to think about it, that the important thing is that it is a task conflict and not that it gets personal into the relation. And I think we keep coming back in all of these episodes to the roles and speaking from the role instead of you as a person. And then in the conversation with your co-founders, Marvin, you mentioned kind of lead and focus on the data, but I'm also hearing that it's important to be aware of and also name that there is a different personal risk for the commercial person and the scientific person as well, and also have some empathy as well towards the commercial co-founder and being aware that that person is also likely like one step closer to the pushing from the investors and customers to over-deliver as well. Thank you so much, Marvin, Signe, and Mia, for joining me. And to our listeners, thank you for your time. And please remember that you can always submit your own dilemma anonymously by following the link in the description. So talk to you next time. A quick note, this podcast is brought to you by Founder to Leader, Denmark's most established leadership development program for founders with personal responsibility. The program combines organizational psychology with experiential learning and is delivered by Copenhagen Business School and the Danish Industry Foundation. It's free to participate, so read more and apply at foundertoleader.dk.